Hello and welcome to another episode of the Measurement Lab. I'm your host, Elijah Carey, and today I am joined by the world's fastest LabVIEW programmer, Mr. Darren Nattinger himself. Darren, welcome. And just for the uninitialized LabVIEW programmer who may not be familiar with you, give us a little bit of your background with LabVIEW. When did you start using it, and what was your first experience like?
Sure. So I guess my very first experience with LabVIEW was when I was an undergraduate at the University of Texas at Austin with Morse. I was a mechanical engineering student. One of our labs had a LabVIEW system that we used to measure thermocouples or pressure or something. I don't remember what we specifically used it for, but this was a system that was running on a Mac, and I think it was probably around LabVIEW 3.0. And we only ran the code. We didn't actually write any LabVIEW code. So that was my very first experience with LabVIEW, was clicking the run button and writing some stuff down on a notepad.
Yep.
Now, go ahead.
I was just going to comment, that's an unfortunately common experience. I know, same for me. Like you had the run button experience, but didn't fully appreciate the power of LabVIEW at that point. But keep going.
Right. So after I graduated from UT, my first job out of college was at NI. I started as an applications engineer in January of 1999. And so the very first training I received was on LabVIEW. We learned LabVIEW 5.0. And that's when I first started writing LabVIEW code, was just getting trained on using LabVIEW Basics 1 and 2 is what the class was called back then. And yeah, real simple introduction. I was an applications engineer for almost 3 years, supporting LabVIEW and NI's DAC products. And then while I was an applications engineer, I worked on many projects. One of those projects was writing some LabVIEW code for LabVIEW R&D. I guess they didn't think it was too terrible because they offered me a position in LabVIEW R&D. And so I moved into R&D in late 2001, worked as a LabVIEW programmer in LabVIEW R&D for over 18 years before I moved into the technical support organization at NI, which is where I am today.
Now, your role in R&D, you said 18 years. It was somewhat unique, although you were part of a group of folks that were actually doing LabVIEW development in the actual product in LabVIEW itself. What were some of the big features? And of course, we're going to get to Quick Drop. That is the main focus here. But aside from Quick Drop, what were some of the other big features that you worked on and wrote specifically in LabVIEW code?
Sure. So yes, in case watchers of this video don't know, many parts of LabVIEW are written with LabVIEW. And so there is a team in LabVIEW R&D that over the years has worked on those different parts of LabVIEW that are written in LabVIEW. So I often tell people that across those 18 years, if there is a VI-based feature in LabVIEW, I probably worked on some part of it at some point. The biggest one of those features is probably Application Builder. So the tool that builds your EXEs, your PPLs, your DLLs, that tool is written in LabVIEW. And so I worked on App Builder a little bit while I was in R&D. I worked on many different toolkits. The report generation toolkit is one. I wrote the VI Analyzer toolkit, the original version. Sometimes I was loaned out to other teams in R&D and worked with them. For example, there was a toolkit called the Simulation Interface Toolkit that I worked on. There were parts of some of the next-gen products that had LabVIEW code under the hood, like the VI lib of LabVIEW NXG itself was obviously written as VIs. There were some other tools like System Designer and some other things that had some VI-based parts behind the scenes. But I guess the TLDR here is that if it's a VI-based feature of LabVIEW, I probably worked on it in some capacity at some point.
And for anyone interested in learning more about Application Builder in particular, we had Akash Bhakta on another episode that explained some of the under-the-hood technology that makes Application Builder tick, which of course is how you build deployments and installers in LabVIEW. But, you know, pivoting to what would become Quick Drop, I think it's an important backdrop to realize when you and I first met, or when we first started working together, when I was a young product manager, I thought of you as the scripting guy. Like you and a handful of other folks were really into this whole scripting technology. And I think that ultimately was important context for what would become Quick Drop. But talk a little bit about, at the time, you know, the unique niche you had around scripting and its advent in the overall LabVIEW landscape.
Sure. So for those of you that don't know, scripting is the feature of LabVIEW that allows you to write VIs that either create other VIs or inspect other VIs. For example, if you want to know how many while loops are on the block diagram of a VI. You could write some scripting code that does that. And the scripting code is written in LabVIEW. So you're writing LabVIEW code to inspect or create LabVIEW code. And yes, you're right. I have probably written more scripting code than anybody on the planet. And a lot of that was from writing tools like the VI Analyzer, which is doing code inspection. And then I've also worked on many tools that do code generation as well. And so, yeah, that's kind of the background there. If you're interested in learning more about scripting, there's a huge library of shipping examples that come with LabVIEW that introduce you to some of those concepts related to inspecting VIs and creating VIs.
One at the time, I kind of thought of scripting as almost the black arts of LabVIEW, because I think that predates having the option in the tools options dialog. You had to know how to get access to the scripting nodes, if I remember correctly, right?
That's right. Yeah, in the early days, it was a private feature, so you had to add a special INI token to enable scripting. And through the efforts of led by the community, JKI being one example, NI got pressure to sort of turn this into an actual product that people could use. So yes, I think around the LabVIEW 8.6 or 2009 timeframe is when scripting was added to LabVIEW as an official feature.
And just for anyone that's in my shoes back when I first heard the word scripting and had no earthly idea what that meant. I mean, we're talking about effectively property nodes and invoke nodes that allow you to programmatically generate, change, or inspect aspects of a VI, be it the front panel or the block diagram. And so scripting nodes do actually, I think it makes it a light blue, right? If you're using
That's right. So yeah, just to take a step back a little bit, if you're familiar with VI Server, it's a way to use properties and methods to manipulate VIs. And we usually, when we think of VI Server, we think about things like programmatically running VIs or programmatically manipulating the appearance of a front panel. And you're right, you're going to write code that involves property nodes and invoke nodes to do that. Scripting is the same thing. You're using property nodes and invoke nodes to manipulate VIs, only it's a much larger library of things that you can do, including lots of stuff on the block diagram. And you're right, scripting nodes typically have a light blue background instead of a light yellow background whenever you see those property nodes and invoke nodes on your diagram.
And critically, they're only going to work in the dev environment, right?
Yes, so that's another thing, is the LabVIEW runtime engine, for the most part, does not support things like generating new VIs or generating or modifying things in VIs, or even inspecting block diagrams. Those are not things that the LabVIEW runtime engine was designed to do. It was designed to run VIs. And so you're right, most of the scripting stuff is going to be typically utilized for tools that are part of the LabVIEW editor itself.
And there is one additional layer of secret methods, right? I personally interact with them much, but I believe they're brown nodes. What are those?
Right. So there's different. So I can actually tell you what the 4 colors are, right? So the first color is yellow. If you see a property node or an invoke node that's yellow, that's just the regular stuff in LabVIEW. Then there's the light blue that we talked about before, which is scripting nodes. And then you're right, there is a way to enable private functionality in LabVIEW. Those are the brown nodes. And the private functionality, people in the LabVIEW community have discovered this functionality and sometimes use this functionality. And the reason it's marked as private is because NI does not guarantee that it will function outside of the specific use cases that NI has added those private things to LabVIEW for. So that's why we mark them that way. It's like, use at your own risk. We don't support this. If you crash LabVIEW, you're on your own. And I mentioned there were 4 colors. The 4th color that some people forget about is a sort of darkish red color, which refers to deprecated nodes. So if you see a property node or an invoke node that's dark red, then that means it's probably been replaced with something else that you might want to investigate using the new thing instead of the deprecated thing.
Wow, I just learned something. I didn't actually know that was a thing. So good to
Glad
know.
to help.
Okay, so as somebody whose entire career has been spent programming in LabVIEW, I think you were one of the ones that recognized early that every click counts, right? And this kind of gave rise to what would become Quick Drop. Give us the pitch, and especially for anyone watching who is still using palettes, what is Quick Drop and why should I care?
Right. So there's. Would you like to hear sort of the history about how Quick Drop got added to LabVIEW? Because I think it's a pretty interesting story.
That's why we're here, Darren. Let's do it.
Okay, great. So back in, I'd say let's see, I added Quick Drop to LabVIEW in 2008. So yeah, the late 2000s, there was a tool that was released by Google called Google Desktop. Did you ever use Google Desktop, Eli?
It sounds vaguely familiar.
So it vaguely familiar because it had like this run where everybody thought it was cool for like a year or two, and then it like disappeared off the face of the
Oh,
planet.
that's right. It was like
Yeah,
Windows Space, and you could do launching stuff
we're
before you
getting
could.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the first thing that you saw when you installed Google Desktop was these widgets that got added to your desktop on, and I'm speaking from Windows here,
Yeah.
but on your Windows computer, you'd install Google Desktop, and you'd see a little widget that had a clock and told you the weather and told you your stock prices and the news and whatever. Well, there was another feature of Google Desktop called Quick Find. And what you would do is it wasn't control space, you would press the control key twice. So control, control.
Uh,
And when you did that, a little search bar came up in the middle of your screen, and it was just a search bar. And you would type something. And it was basically Google giving you results of the thing you typed that might be files on your computer or applications on your computer or web search results. Like it all sort of came up when you typed in this little thing. And so, everybody, like I said, everybody was using this thing back in the late 2000s until it just disappeared off the face of the earth. But I found that really useful. Just with a simple key press, I could immediately start typing a thing and find what I was looking for. So I started thinking, since at this point I had been in LabVIEW R&D for several years. You're right. A big focus of my career was at that point was delighting LabVIEW users, making the environment more efficient for them to utilize. And so I immediately started thinking about one of the most inefficient things in LabVIEW programming, which is navigating the palettes. Now, at that point, almost 10-year LabVIEW programmer, I was pretty good at LabVIEW, pretty efficient at LabVIEW. I knew where all the stuff was in the palettes. I really did. There was not very much hunt and peck, me trying to find things. I knew where it all was because I programmed in LabVIEW all day, every day. And it frustrated me that, I'd be writing a block diagram and I would think, oh, I need a typecast function. And then the first thought is like, all right, here we go. Time to navigate the palettes. The typecast was buried really deep in a really nested palette. So I'd go programming, functions, numeric, additional numeric functions, or whatever it was. And I'd finally find the typecast. And I thought, I know this thing is called typecast. Why can't I just type typecast? Why can't I bring up a search bar, just like that Google quick find thing, type typecast and get one on my block diagram?
Yeah.
That was the genesis of the idea for Quick Drop. Now, it just so happens that right around this time, LabVIEW R&D was experimenting with a tool called the Idea Market. So think about the idea exchange. We've got that on ni.com. You can post an idea, people vote for it. If it gets enough votes, then ni might look at it. Well, we had something very similar inside of NI. So internally to NI, we had our own idea exchange, what we called an idea market. The reason it was a market is because you actually had fake money that you could invest in different ideas in the idea market. And if an idea got enough investment, then R&D leadership was obliged to take a look at those ideas that NI employees thought were a good idea and see if we should actually invest in those for the actual product. So all of these ideas I had about, the initial Quick Drop thing, coupled with this whole idea market thing, I actually put together a prototype back in LabVIEW 8.5 of what Quick Drop might work like. And I created an idea market idea, and it was the #1 highest idea market voted idea in the couple of years that we did the idea market. Everybody loved it. Management came in and said, okay, we should probably add this to a future version of LabVIEW. And I said, I think we should add it now. And so I managed to convince management and everybody else that this idea market idea was so good. And I already had a prototype and I was ready to put it in the product that we sort of did a rush job, not in a negative way. We did a rush job and got it into LabVIEW 8.6, which released in 2008. So that is the genesis story of Quick Drop.
I remember that. I was a LabVIEW product manager at the time. And just listening to you describe the arduous task being the typecast node just makes me feel tired, right? Like hey, Quick Drop ultimately you've saved LabVIEW programmers an immeasurable amount of time and clicks and navigation. And you moused over a subpalette and it went away. Now, Quick Drop though has evolved beyond just that initial use case, right? You started with typecast, boom, done. Right. But then you quickly identified some other cases, and this is where I think scripting makes its debut in the intersection of the Quick Drop functionality. I know I personally go to like 4 or 5 of these, but talk a little bit about the advent of
Sure.
those and how you were able to integrate those into this experience.
Sure. So what you're referring to is called quick drop keyboard shortcuts. And I introduced those in LabVIEW 2009. So basically the next release after the first quick drop release. And yeah, the story there is I am a LabVIEW programmer. I have never written a line of C++ or C# code in my entire life.
Not one
And
line?
so, not one line. And
Wow.
so, as a LabVIEW programmer who works on LabVIEW and who wants to make LabVIEW programming more efficient, I was looking for ways that I could hook into the LabVIEW editor and be able to write scripting code to accomplish various editor tasks to make me a faster LabVIEW programmer. And so typically when you want to add a feature to the LabVIEW editor, that's something that the C++ programmers do. They go into the LabVIEW source code and they, add a right-click menu or a change to how wiring works, or something to that effect. Double click on a function and something happens. That all needs to take place in the C++ code. Well, with Quick Drop, you're kind of in my world now, right? You press Control Space, my VI comes up. That's me. Now I can decide what we do when that VI is up. And so I very quickly realized that Quick Drop itself was a great hook to be able to add scripting-based features. And I'll be honest, I got a little bit of pushback when I first introduced this. For example, probably the most popular Quick Drop keyboard shortcut is Control Space Control R, which removes an object and then preserves the wires through that object.
Yep.
Some of the initial feedback I got from people was, why do I have to bring up Quick Drop to remove and rewire? Like, you're not naming something, you're not typing the name of something. That doesn't seem like it belongs with something that Quick Drop does. And my answer is, you're absolutely right. That is not something that Quick Drop should do. However, I wanted to add the feature. I'm not a C++ programmer. How am I going to add a feature into LabVIEW? I'm going to make it a hook into Quick Drop. That's why Control Space Control R is in Quick Drop. It's because that's the kind of features I can add to LabVIEW. Simple as that.
I feel like there's a pretty good probability that I was one of the people that gave you that feedback. I was the
Maybe so.
product manager at the time. But I mean, it still stands that, like, why do I have to launch Quick Drop? I mean, I get it, and it's fine because now you've got this huge. It's more than fine. It's great. But yeah, it's like, hey, this is awesome. I can remove nodes and it just rewires for me. Can I do that with 2 less button presses, please? But ultimately, once you're in once you're in your world, right?
Yeah.
You've now given the ability to add all sorts of other shortcuts. So, and these are user defined, right? Hey, what are some of your personal favorites? What are the ones you use the most often?
Yeah. So Control Space Control R obviously is the one that I use the most. Control Space Control D and Control Space Control Shift D. What that'll do is if you have objects selected on the diagram and you press Control Space Control D or Shift D, it'll create controls and indicators or constants off of all of the unwired inputs of those functions. So I find that to be really useful when sort of experimenting or prototyping. Like, the most common example I give people is the match pattern function. I use match pattern a lot, but not enough that I always remember exactly what all the little tokens are to wire into it. So I control in a new VI, Control Space drop match pattern, Control Space Control D creates controls and indicators for all the inputs. Now I can instantly start messing with and debugging that function. And then there's that's sort of like the debugging and experimenting use case. Then obviously there's times where it's just kind of a quick accelerator. You see that function and you know that you need constants off of the 2 inputs that aren't wired. Control Space Control Shift D makes constants for them. I like that one a lot. And then since I do so much scripting programming, I'm using property nodes, invoke nodes, class specifier constants. I'm using those things a lot. Whenever you need to select a class or select a property or select a method, have you ever tried to navigate those menus? Whenever you drop a property node, and let's say you need to set a property of a VI or a control in the front panel.
Sure.
And it's a huge drop-down list, and you have to sort of scroll and find the thing that you want. Or what if you are trying to specify the class of an object? Like you have a class specifier constant known in block diagram, and you need it to be of the combo box class. So you click it, and then you start going, generic, G-object, control, string, combo box. Again, it's just this massive menu, right? Well, there's a quick drop shortcut that lets you type the name of the class that you want or the name of the property that you want. It's Control Space Control B or Control Shift B. So that one saves me a lot of time. It saves me a lot of time because I happen to know the names of all the classes and all the properties and stuff that I want. If you don't know those names, then you probably do need to browse through the list to find them. But as someone who writes a ton of scripting code, a ton of VI server code, control space, control B, that B is in boy. That's another one that I like a lot.
Isn't there a shortcut for your control D shortcut to place down all the controls and indicators? Isn't there a way to specify only the required inputs? Am I making that up?
There is. You're not making that up. That's a shortcut that doesn't come up very often, but it's pretty handy, and I actually use it a lot. So when you select the objects, you press Control Space, and if you type in REQ for required before you press Control D or Control Shift D, it'll only create the controls or constants for the required inputs.
Ah, nice. Okay. So if somebody, so I'm guessing if I were to sit down in front of your computer, how many quick drop shortcuts would you guess you have installed?
So I primarily use the ones that ship with LabVIEW, and the reason for that is I worked in LabVIEW R&D for a long time. So if there was a shortcut that I thought was useful, I would just add it to LabVIEW. So there are a bunch of community shortcuts available at ni.com/quickdrop. Probably my favorite of the community shortcuts is, this will take a little bit of explanation. Let's say there is a snippet of code on your block diagram that you drop regularly. Like we're not just talking about a single node here, but like maybe a loop with some stuff in it. You know, what the most common example I can think of is the JKI state machine. If you actually pick that from QuickDrop or the palettes and you drop it, and it drops a gigantic state machine on your diagram with a million nodes in it, right? So that's a snippet of code. That's not just a single thing. Well, there's a QuickDrop shortcut, Control Space Control G, G as in good. That's on ni.com/quickdrop. You can highlight some code, Control Space Control G. It will turn that code into a snippet that you can now drop at any time that you want from QuickDrop. So you don't have to go through the effort of creating a VI, adding it to the palette, editing your palette set. It's just with a single key press, you can define a code snippet as a chunk of code that you're going to want to drop again in the future. That one I think is really useful.
Just to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
Chunk of code, I want to reuse it. I highlight it, Control Space, Control G, and that automatically then basically puts it into a buffer where I can place it down. And is it Control G again to place it down?
So it's not even a buffer. It's creating a new object that's actually created in the palettes. And again, this is transparent to you. You don't see this. You don't know this. But it creates that snippet, sticks it in the palettes, and this is now a palette object. And as I haven't mentioned yet, and I probably should have, QuickDrop gives you access to all of the palette objects in LabVIEW. It also gives you access to the VIs that are in your project. But for what we're talking about here, it gives you access to everything in the palette. So it actually, that snippet, it creates that as a VI in the palettes that you can then drop. And when you drop, it drops the snippet and doesn't drop it as a VI.
So I know that, so first off, I rely heavily on QuickDrop. I hate navigating the palettes if I don't have to. But to your point, sometimes I don't remember the exact right string of the function or node. And I know there's been some talk about how to potentially better address that. Can you comment on, first off, like, how do you learn those? Is it just pure muscle memory of time spent? And is there a future in which maybe that gets a little bit easier?
So I can't speak to the future. I'm not in LabVIEW R&D anymore, but I can sort of speak to the past a little bit and what the future might look like. So this comes up a lot. Like, what if I don't know the exact name of the thing that I want? Well, not to be glib, but QuickDrop is kind of for when you know the exact name. Right. Like, if you know the exact name, that's why it's called QuickDrop, is because you already know the name. Just get me that thing as quickly as possible. LabVIEW already has a mechanism for searching the palettes for things when you don't know the exact name. That's palette search. You bring up the palettes. There's the little magnifying glass you can search. Now, if you are pretty close to knowing what you want, you can still use QuickDrop pretty successfully. For example, let's say you need the function that opens a TCP connection. Is that called open TCP, create TCP, initialize TCP? Maybe you don't know the exact name, but you know it's got TCP. So if you type in TCP in QuickDrop, that's going to filter the list pretty small and probably help you narrow down the exact thing that you want. So you don't necessarily need to know the exact name. And then another thing is QuickDrop, it's the way that it matches the strings. If you type in init, I-N-I-T, that's going to give you any VI that has that string, including VIs that start with the word initialize. And so you don't have to type in the entire word. You can do partial matches. And then another one, If it's an object that you drop frequently, hopefully you know the name of it. Even if you don't, you can add object shortcuts. And we haven't talked about that yet, but that's just the ability to take a few characters on your keyboard and assign those to be a particular object. For example, the case structure. It is the most common object in all VI block diagrams on this entire planet. And so case structures get dropped a lot. You, instead of pressing Control Space and having to type in CASE until it auto-completes, LabVIEW ships with an object shortcut for case structure CS. So Control Space CS, that gives you case structure in the list. So you can assign object shortcuts to things that maybe you know their name, maybe you don't, but if it's something that you use frequently, you can give it an object shortcut and memorize that instead.
Well, and this brings me to another point, which is having watched you program, specifically in some of the recent competitions of days old, that is the world's fastest LabVIEW programmers challenge. I think one thing that observant people will notice is your hands don't move. In other words, you're not taking your hand off the mouse to type the name of what you're looking for. And I think that's because you're using object shortcuts. Can you explain how that enables you to be that much faster, even with quick drop?
Sure. So let's talk about the most efficient way to program in LabVIEW. So you're right. If you can keep your left hand on the keyboard and your right hand on the mouse, and again, this is assuming you are the type of person who uses a mouse with your right hand, which I would say is most LabVIEW programmers. And so if you have your mouse with your right hand, your keyboard with your left hand, you're right. If there are things you can do on the left side of the keyboard that don't require you to either move your left hand over or move your mouse hand over, if you can keep your hands in the left on the keyboard, right on the mouse arrangement, you're going to be able to program faster in LabVIEW. So all of the object shortcuts that ship with LabVIEW, and I think there's about 100 of them, almost all of them are typable with your left hand only. Now there's a few that aren't. For example, all the little conversion bullets like to I32, to U8, to I64, those guys, their object shortcuts are just those things, I32, I64, whatever. But the majority of the objects that you type, the object shortcuts that you type in QuickDrop are going to be typable with your left hand only. And so when you have that sort of efficiency builder where right hand never leaves the mouse, left hand never leaves the left side of the keyboard, you're going to be a lot faster at programming in LabVIEW. Now, there's one other little step we should consider, which is once you have typed in enough in QuickDrop to get the name of the thing you want, what do you do then? Now, if you press Enter on your keyboard, which you can do, you're back to the same problem as before. Maybe your mouse hand has to reach over to press Enter. Maybe your left hand has to reach over to press Enter. So maybe you don't want to do that. Let's say instead you want to double click on the item that you see in QuickDrop because that's also allowed. Well, again, that might be a reduction in efficiency because now your mouse, which is probably on the area of your block diagram where you want to code, your mouse has to move over to double click on a thing in QuickDrop and then move back on the diagram to drop the thing. Instead, what you should do is something that I like to call super quick drop. This is not immediately obvious to people, but once they find out about it, their lives are changed. So press Control Space, type the thing that you want, hopefully with your left hand only, and click on the block diagram or the front panel where you want that thing to be dropped, and it will be dropped there. You don't have to double click in QuickDrop. You don't have to press Enter to put it on your cursor. We sort of skip the whole step of putting it on your cursor and just drop it where you clicked. That's super quick drop. That is the fastest way to program in LabVIEW.
Yeah, so basically whatever is highlighted at the top of quick drop is effectively already on your mouse. You don't have to put it on your mouse.
That's right.
Awesome. Super quick drop. So back to the question I asked you earlier about the future of quick drop. I will speak to what I was referring to, which is we're obviously exploring the use of AI. Our early access program was announced this past tonight, and I think there's an opportunity to look at helping users find the function based on a semantic search. So that's something I know we're exploring and could help if you don't know the exact function. That said, I will offer, I think when teaching LabVIEW, I'm not sure if you've taught anyone LabVIEW in recent years, but do you start with quick drop or do you still start with the palettes?
So it has been several years since I've taught a LabVIEW class. I'd say probably 5 or 6 years. And I'm happy to report that the recent releases of NI courses like LabVIEW Core 1 and LabVIEW Core 2, they introduce both quick drop and the palettes. And so from a very early point, you're taught about how to navigate the palettes and you're taught about how to use quick drop. And I think the exercises themselves lean towards quick drop because it sort of helps that, you're told the name of the thing you're supposed to drop in the exercise, might as well just use quick drop to drop it.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I think any new programmer should learn that early on. All right. Well, Darren, I mean, the work you did to create Quick Drop has again changed the lives of countless LabVIEW programmers in terms of saving time and improved efficiency. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much. Keep up the good work. And if you liked this video, this is part of the ongoing series where you get to hear from experts like Darren about their contributions to the LabVIEW ecosystem and some of the cool technologies they've worked on. So if you're interested, please do like and subscribe. If you have questions for Darren, want to learn more about any of the things he mentioned here, like Quick Drop, please do leave a comment. We'll do our best to get back to that. Anyway, thank you so much, Darren, for your time. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Cheers.
This was great, Eli. Bye.